So one of the wisest women I've ever known is my grandmother, actually. When I was young, I used to live with her. And she used to actually have nightmares about going to school and peeping in on the school walls to try to get some education. And her brother would come and smack her in the head and say, girls shouldn't be educated and go home and do your chores. And when she was growing up, I'm from South Korea. Korea was going through this rapid phase of socioeconomic growth. And there was a common belief that education is not worth it for young girls. And she didn't really have a champion in her life or anybody in her family to really believe in her. And so she had to drop out of school when she was in second grade, even though she was incredibly smart, and essentially start working very young and get married very young, and then started having kids, and she had a life essentially for other people. And so she always had it in her that she had a lot of potential that she couldn't really uncover. She wanted to maybe become a journalist or a doctor, but she had to really live a life that she was happy with but was for other people. And so when I was growing up with her, she made me realize the importance and the value of education. And to not take it for granted, and to realize that there's so many children in this world who are just like her even today, who really have a lot of potential, but because a lack of someone in their lives to really believe in them and lack of resources, there's just no way for them to get there. And so the story of MMI really starts with, I think, my grandmother, who was really influential in my early days in making me really passionate about the value of education and the value of having a believer, a champion in a child's life. When I came to India, actually with two companies that are both working in the education space. One is called the Parthenon Group. It's a strategy management consulting firm. The second is called Dalberg, which is the international development management consulting firm. And at Dalberg, I got to work on a project for a foundation based in Qatar that was looking at educating children for primary education across the world. And I was leading the India team. And in that project, I got to travel all over India, from Rajasthan, where there's a big challenge with girl-child education, to rural Andhra Pradesh, where there's a big cotton industry and kids are picked for child labor, to Gujarat, where there's a big migrant population. So kids get educated 6 months out of the year, but then they have to move to a completely different language medium school, and so their education cycles are disrupted. To some sort of what we call urban centers of poverty, like cities like Ahmedabad or Mumbai, where there are lots of different challenges and survival issues and transportation challenges to getting to school. And so I realized that while India has made this big jump in education through the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan movement, there were so many children who still were getting left behind. And I asked myself why. And these brilliant children that I met that had so many dreams, doctor, to become an engineer, to become Bollywood actor, policeman, a lot of them I could see that their life trajectories are not going to change drastically from where their parents were, despite this Education for All movement. And I really thought that they really don't have many resources, despite the great work that a lot of NGOs are doing in their lives on a personal level, for them to really take that next step up. So a lot of times their parents are working around the clock just to ensure their family's daily survival. And teachers are managing anywhere from 40 to 60 children in a classroom. And so they have a lot of administrative work if they're a government school teacher. And teacher attendance even is an issue in this country. So I felt like every child needs that adult figure, that champion in their lives that was missing also in my grandmother's life. And so I saw a lot of parallels from my grandmother's story and with the kids that I was meeting in India, and felt like there was something that I could do to really help them. Because looking back at my life and the way that I was able to get to college in the US and to graduate school, was really through not just financial resources or being smart, because I feel like my grandmother was probably much smarter than or wiser than I am for sure, was because I had believers, true champions in their lives, in my life, who really believed in my full potential, who helped me guide through where I am today. looking back at my time when I was a working professional in Bombay, I've realized that a lot of my peers, whether they're working in the social sector or not, would have wanted to do more volunteering. But there aren't that many volunteering opportunities that are structured, that are focused on the development of that volunteer as well, that also keep you accountable. You can come and play with the kids once in a while, and that's great, but there's very little accountability, and there's no way to track your own impact either. And so when I thought about this challenge of lack of role models in a child's life to really guide them through, I realized that why not, connect these potential mentors, young professionals who really want to give back to society in some way, to these children who need them. So there was a clear need and demand for mentoring, and an active supply of people who were interested in uncovering more about themselves and giving back to society. I took a class at the Harvard Education School called Entrepreneurship and Innovation in Education. And through that course, I got to really structure how to set up a social enterprise and really test this idea in phases, from developing an elevator pitch to really thinking about your revenue, essentially your fundraising model, to building a business plan, which was the final deliverable for this course. And got a lot of support from the faculty, but as well as my classmates who I would just bounce ideas off of. And one of the really influential books was this one called Abundance by Peter Diamandis. And it's just the concept that basically there are lots of resources around you if you just become a little more creative to address a problem. So for example, if there's a shortage of teachers, maybe in that classroom there are a couple of kids who are really bright and could also teach other kids. So the idea of peer teaching, essentially. And in this context, I felt like, what does India not lack in? It's really people, especially with the rise of the middle class. I felt like there would not be a shortage of really passionate and committed mentors who also want to give a bit of their time and energies to helping shape a child's life in a positive way. And so we started to really build a team around this idea. So once we had the initial idea that this concept of mentoring can really be influential and have huge impact in the context of urban India especially, we wanted to launch a pilot. And we didn't have any on-the-ground resources because this team was really largely based in the Harvard community. And so the first thing we did was to identify strong champions in India. And from my previous work at Dalberg, working in the Bombay office, I had friends who were passionate about education and youth development. And so we enlisted volunteers again from Dalberg as well as from Teach for India, this wonderful lady Archana, who was a fellow who worked in a Pune Akanksha Foundation school, who also decided to help us with this early phase of assessing whether there's a need and what kind of need is there. And so we did interviews with potential parents, focus groups with a group of potential mentor candidates, etc., to figure out whether this model could work. And our initial feedback was really positive. A lot of teachers and school leaders were really excited about this idea, and parents were bought into it as long as there were free resources, which our model at this point is a nonprofit. And so, given those early lessons, we decided to launch a pilot program, just starting with a small batch of 30 mentor-mentee pairs. So we started with 30 mentors and 30 mentees, but one of the key challenges for us from the very beginning was, how do we know whether this is working? Unlike a for-profit model where your value proposition is essentially demonstrated by people or customers buying your product, right? If a lot of people start wanting it and they pay for it, of course there's value in it. But in a nonprofit model, that true value is difficult to measure, because if you're giving something for free, even if there's a tiny little value that's not really worth the return on, that doesn't have a lot of return on investment, they may say, I want it, right? And so for us, it really was important to establish from early on what our impact was going to be. And so we decided to do a study called Randomized Controlled Trial, RCT, which is essentially getting a group of people, or a group of, for us, children, who are all equally eligible for this program. So we asked the Kangxie Foundation to draft a list of 60, not 30, potential mentees, girls from the age of 9 to 12, into the program. And then we randomly selected 30 of them to get a mentor, and 30 did not get a mentor. And we measured their baseline characteristics on academics as well as psychosocial dimensions that are built around our curriculum, which are these 4 pillars of development. And so we measured their change from the beginning to mid-year, and mid-year to the end as well. So we did 3 of those surveys and also tracked the academic impact. And by looking at not only did these children grow, but how did they grow, how did our mentees grow in relation to the control group, who were equally as eligible to become mentees. That's where your impact difference lies in, right? The difference in difference. And so we looked at that and we realized that for English, for example, by the end of just 1 year, on average, our mentees were performing 11 percentage points higher at a statistically significant level of 99%, which means that, if you randomly collect a sample, there's less than 1% chance that you would have a difference as big as 11 percentage points. So we knew that in English language skills they're having a clear impact. So as of now, we had just proven our concept. We have the minimal viable product. We know that mentoring works in the context of India. Now, before we really scale rapidly, we need to build internal capacity. We've been essentially bootstrapping and relying on volunteers for everything, and that takes a lot of time, graphics designing, whether it's maintaining our website, and it's also wonderful to engage volunteers in that way too. But we need to build more systems in place and build out a team of management and leadership before we can really think about scaling to a big organization. And so right now we're in the second phase, prior to replicating and scaling, which is building capacity and really testing out models of scale. And so our MVP as it is now, it's not going to be able to replicate because we've cut down on a lot of things which is available to us just now because of the small scale. And so one thing that is absolutely critical for us as we scale is not losing quality. And I think this is a classic dilemma in any social enterprise or even a for-profit company. How do you scale and scale quickly so that you can create this large impact and not have anyone wait around for you to reach them, right? Which is the case today, but without compromising on the quality of the relationships, and first and foremost putting the child first and ensuring safety, because that is what could essentially break our model. If we have one bad case, we're done, right? So the legal implications of it, the reputational impact. So the risk of essentially losing our quality is just not worth breaking and scaling fast. And I think everyone talks about technology, and technology is going to solve everything, but we're really thinking about, okay, what is it about the program coordinator role that will allow us to maintain high quality? And what is it that can be automated and can reduce the burden on our human element? So technology will never replace the human element. We want to enhance the human element and empower the people, who are essentially, at the end of the day, still really critical for ensuring child safety, as well as to really know exactly what's going on in each mentor-mentee pair and help them tackle their challenges, which are very individual to that pair. And so one idea that we already implemented and we're tracking success of is called SMS. It's an SMS tracker, essentially, so that the mentor can send an SMS to a number, and we can see when they're meeting. And so as a basic question as when they're meeting, how often they're meeting, for how long, right now the program coordinators have to follow up with each of their 60 mentor-mentee pairs. Hey, have you met? Why haven't you met? And so that will now become much easier if they see, okay, these are the mentors who've met this week. Let me check in on the ones that haven't met, for example. The next iteration to that is we want to build an application mobile app. Everybody has a smartphone these days. That's really a burden, not a homework that they have to do in addition to mentoring, but really enhancing the mentoring experience. So imagine if they get a reminder that they have a session coming up with their mentee, or a notification saying, hey, you haven't met your mentee in the last 2 weeks. What's up, right? Or being able to rate your mentoring experience on a scale of 1 to 5. 1, that didn't go so well. 3, so-so. 5, excellent. So the first $1,000 or 60,000 rupees or so of MMI funding actually came from Harvard. The Harvard Business School, HBS, was launching a new ventures competition, which was for startups, and they had a track called the Social Enterprise Track. So every team that was entering that competition got to get, every legitimate team, a certain amount of seed funding, which was critical for us to essentially put our first investment in, which was at building a website that took skills that internally our team didn't have. And the website that we have today actually is from all the way from that moment when we got our first $1,000. And since then, we really relied in our early days on crowd fundraising. So similar to a platform like Kickstarter for a for-profit initiative, there's a platform called rally.org. There are other ones like Indiegogo, etc. So we use this crowdfunding platform called Rally to raise our first $15,000 from our friends and family, largely. And our average donation size was quite small. It was like $80 or something like that. So we got, hundreds of people essentially to really give to this cause. And that, the pro of that was that it got the word out. Like if they had a friend in Mumbai that was interested in this, or had a friend of a friend, for example, if they gave a small, seed funding, they're also interested in learning a bit more about the program and maybe spreading the word. So even though it took a lot of energy to write these individual emails, and we had a whole team of our, founding members of 10 students all reaching out to their networks, at the end, the result was that we had a lot of energy and momentum, and the word spread, at least in the US community. Then our next level of funding, or our kind of scaling up piece, or the next stage of our funding, was to get corporations interested. So we felt like funding from the US is really helpful because the dollar there is 63 rupees. It goes a much longer way in India. And at the same time, there are also connections in the Indian diaspora that we can leverage here in Mumbai. But still, it doesn't come with the same level of sort of the ability to connect closely with the program by maybe becoming a mentor. So we started to build out our India fundraising arm as well, and we had a really big, successful fundraiser at Cafe Zoe, where we had probably around 500 people come, and it was a party. It was a launch party. We had a band, a couple of really great bands, including the other people, and so we created a lot of buzz. And that was really great at not only raising money, but also raising our profile and raising awareness. So fundraiser was really good for that. And then the next level of funding was through essentially corporations. So we believe that that is one of the most scalable models of funding for a program like Mentor Me India, where we are able to engage with their employees and provide them with an opportunity to give back to society and really experience what it's like to live in a community that they work in, but they may not feel like they're a part of, right? Thinking about challenges in India, I think two things come to mind. First is a programmatic challenge, which is that in a program like Mentor Me India, where we're entrusting the lives of young children to initially a stranger, right, adults, safety becomes a big issue. And to do that in the US, there's a strong culture of background checks and police verification, which is not really there in the Indian system. So we then really rely a lot on having an hour-long in-person interview to really figure out what kind of a person this person is, as well as doing really thorough professional and personal background checks. But it still remains a challenge without that infrastructure. the other piece of programmatic challenge is that the culture of mentoring in India is not as strong, right? Or not this. There is this culture of having a guru, but it's a slightly different thing to structured mentoring. So Big Brothers, for example, have been around for over 100 years, and there's a strong culture of what it means to be a mentor that it's not really present yet in this really systematic way. So every time we talk to a child or a parent or even some teachers, they think, oh, a mentor is a teacher, it's a disciplinarian. Do I have to pay this person? And because the culture of volunteering is also quite nascent. And so those are some programmatic challenges that we're having to really explain and kind of build awareness around it. The other piece of it is the bureaucracy and the legal aspects. I think if I had to pick, one of the most challenging things that I had to do was to do the paperwork for setting up our FCRA bank account to be able to receive funds from foreign sources. It was literally like a nightmare. There were 40 different papers, and we had to get the signature on here and on top of here, use this type of ink, this stamp had to be here. I had to redo it about 3 times. I thought it would take about a week to get all the paperwork together. It probably took about, a month with a lot of my time and a lot of hair pulling. And so in relative to the US, where we had to set up a bank account, it took, maybe an hour and it was there. So even to set up the NGO 501c3 took about 2 months in the US or a month and a half with the new easy essentially way of applying to get a 501c3 versus in India you have to first get your basic organization registered as a nonprofit entity, so you can be a trust, or for Mentor Me India we're actually a Section 8 company under the Companies Act. It used to be the old Section 25. And so first you have to get registered, which takes a few months. Then you have to get your ADG, which is the ability to get tax breaks as an organization. The separate process that takes a few months. So Mentor Me India was inspired by the Big Brothers Big Sisters model, which is one-to-one mentoring, and we're right now working in a community-based versus a center-based model, which means that the mentors and the mentees largely meet in public places that they choose jointly, which can be their school grounds or a park nearby or doing a session outside. It's not bound to a physical space. And our mentors and mentees meet every week or every other week, 4 to 5 hours at least a month, and they typically live relatively close to each other. So we have cohorts by geography. Right now we have about 200 pairs, mentors and mentees, so it's nearly 400 people, which is really exciting, across 4 general regions of Bombay. So that includes Dadar, Grant Road area, Goregaon area, as well as Bandhup and Thane. So we're trying to also cover multiple geographies. We figured out that one of the key elements to success in a relationship is distance, actually. If it's really easy for the mentor to meet the child, the mentor is much more likely to go maybe after work or on weekends. If it's an hour just to get there and physically draining, it's going to be far harder for them to meet more regularly. And that consistency and meeting regularly and often is really important to building a strong relationship early on. So we're trying to have presence across even more points in between these big hubs right now in Bombay as we grow. And we plan to grow from right now where we are 200 to maybe about 500. So right now we're at about 200 mentor-mentee pairs. Our hope is to grow to 500 to maybe 1,000 in the next year or two, and grow to reach eventually maybe double the size of Big Brothers in the US to 600,000 mentor-mentee pairs. We think that there's a lot of potential given the population in India. And the other thing that differentiates our model from Big Brothers is that it's far more structured, and there's a lot of emphasis on the mentoring community. So it's not just the mentor, mentee, and the and the match support specialist like it's in Big Brothers, but it's really creating a sense of a cohort, which includes the mentor-mentee and the other peer mentor-mentees that live and sort of work around the same area. And so we do a lot of group training sessions that are ongoing throughout the year every other month. And there's also group mentoring sessions where we bring the whole group together. And we feel like this is important because it builds a sense of a community which facilitates knowledge sharing. So someone just said, well, actually each mentor-mentee pair that you have is like an R&D center, right? They're trying their own things and learning things as they go. And the more that we can leverage those lessons to be shared across each other, the stronger our program is going to be. So we try to have them meet more regularly so that they build a relationship, not just one-on-one, but with also an affinity to Mentor Me India's bigger cohort. So through these regular group sessions in the first year, we hope that the mentor-mentees build a strong relationship so that they can carry on this much more organically and at a much lower cost going forward. So a lot of our costs are actually upfront, and it's in the first year where we're recruiting and screening and matching the mentees and mentors and training them, inducting them, and then doing all these continued sessions as well as the group mentoring sessions, etc. In the second year, it's much more flexible. Now the foundation is already there, and they already figured out a schedule that works for the mentor-mentee to meet, and then they know what some early challenges are. It's all about taking it to the next level. So we have far more sort of active outreach, but more kind of outreach from the mentors as they need. So the cost per child drops dramatically as we extend these mentoring relationships. So year 2, year 3, for example, we estimate will be like a quarter of the cost of supporting the first year mentors, where a bulk of the programming lies in. And that structure of continued support in this sort of in a programmatic manner is not there at Big Brothers. And we think that this is an important factor in the context of India to really help increase the program quality, where people are not used to maybe volunteering in such a structured manner, to set that precedent and form the strong bond that we need initially. One message that I would have for students in the entrepreneurship course, especially interested in social enterprise, is to pick a cause that you feel deeply passionate about. You are going to be breathing this in and out. Every moment you wake up, and it's maybe fortunate or unfortunate, I think about all the challenges that we're facing and all the exciting opportunities as I'm going to sleep and as I'm waking up, right? The first couple of years will be like that. So if you feel something that you're about, it's just not going to work. You're going to be the one that needs to inspire the entire team and to take this forward. And it's your dream, but you need to also make it everyone else's dream. Like that early founding team, the motivation, the energy is so important. And to not feel extremely passionate about what you do, you just can't get there. So to be able to give all of yourself, but also to translate that to everyone else around you, pick something that you love.